And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Tomorrow morning's flying weather graphic. A lot of VFR here over interior Alaska, except up here over the Brooks Range and eastern north slope to the Arctic coast. Some marginal VFR there with a little bit of IFR in toward the mountains, and also over along the border, possible IFR. Otherwise, pretty good here. Areas of marginal VFR there for the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country. And VFR, Gulf of Alaska, northern Panhandle, marginal VFR for the southern southeast coast. And some of that sliding into Kodiak Island. Otherwise, southwest coast, southern Bering Sea, VFR, Aleutians, VFR, and St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait, VFR. And for the Saturday afternoon time, we're looking at some marginal VFR now, spreading over the Alaska Peninsula and all of the Aleutians with some IFR for shimmy in that too. Otherwise, central eastern Bering Sea up to the Arctic Ocean, VFR, into the interior, VFR. Possible areas of marginal VFR here along and to the north of the eastern Alaska Range. Improving here over the eastern Beaufort Sea coast and North Slope areas, but marginal VFR due to blowing snow holding in that area probably into the afternoon, at least until early evening. Otherwise, the southeast coast, marginal VFR, but VFR from, say, Juneau over to possibly Sitka northward. And then for the Sunday morning, marginal VFR shifting a little farther to the north here. Forecast to spread into at least southern Prince William Sound and the east side of the Kenai Peninsula, Seward on down into the Barren Islands, and Kodiak Island, pretty much marginal VFR now, and possible marginal VFR across the eastern Copper River Basin, and mostly marginal for the Panhandle with some IFR showing up down south, and back to the marginal VFR for the central western Arctic coast areas, and marginal VFR, southern Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, staying south of the Pribilofs there. So it looks like at least through early Sunday, it'll stay marginal VFR there, or VFR there for St. Paul and St. George, northward to the Bering Strait, and the Aleutians marginal, and that holds through Sunday. Marginal VFR for the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, southern Bristol Bay here. Staying VFR, Pribilof Islands, Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence Island, and interior Alaska, good VFR. Persistent marginal VFR for the North Slope eastern Arctic coast. IFR now over the southern Panhandle, otherwise marginal VFR across Prince William Sound and into the mountains to the north, Kamishak Bay, Kachemak Bay possibly, and Kodiak Island. Passes for tomorrow, all open for the Brooks Range. At least Anatuvik and Adigan are open. For the western Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR. VFR for Rainy, Isabel, Windy, and even Mintasta. Tanita, VFR. Portage, VFR. Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels here at the surface off the North Gulf Coast down across Kodiak Island. We've got 2,000 to 4,000 foot freezing levels with northward push of moisture and warmer air coming into the southern southeast coast. And then a big area of warm air aloft out here over the central western Bering Sea, anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 feet there, with some upper level ridging bringing warmer air into the southwest part of the state, particularly Bristol Bay, tomorrow morning at about 4,000 feet there. And for icing, none of any significance over mainland Alaska, the Aleutians, or the Bering Sea, or most of the southeast coast. There is an elevated threat of possible light icing there for the southern southeast coast. And for the winds aloft, upper level low dropping into the along the eastern border here to just north of Eagle. Colder northerly flow here to the west of that center at about 75 knots, taking a turn to the west at about 80 knots in over the Yukon, lighter for the Panhandle. Big area high pressure out here over the far northwestern Bering Sea, and just a massive flow around that, but not all that strong, but northerly turning northeast, 65 to 75 knots. And for 9,000 feet, those winds 55 knots out of the northeast turning east for the western Aleutians, northeast up to 45 in a small area here of the southwest interior, 55 knots there right along the Yukon River there, the upper Yukon River, just to the west of Fort Yukon. Much lighter with a trough right through here. Winds for the North Gulf Coast, 45 knots eastern Aleutians, and pretty light for the Panhandle. Coming down to 3,000 feet, light winds for the southeast coast, eastern interior. Small area of northeast 40-knot winds through the gaps here of Prince William Sound. Passes in those areas, and then northeast winds 40 knots there along the mid and upper Yukon River Valley. Increase here across the southwest interior up to 65 knots there blowing across Nunivak Island, 55 knots across the Pribilof Islands. And turbulence with those winds, considerable moderate turbulence here, southwest interior, actually the Kuskokwim Valley, and especially the Kuskokwim Mountains there, all the way out to St. Paul and St. George. And then along the mountainous terrain, pretty good chance of seeing some considerable moderate mechanical turbulence there. And also for the extreme eastern Arctic coast areas and northern Lynn Canal.